by, and what does the scripture say in Ephesians? Not tossed here and there by every wind and wave of doctrine. And so we're to grow up. That's the challenge of us as Christians. We're to grow up individually,
Right.
and we're to grow up as a group. And one of the reasons that I am in fellowship with you is you help me grow in Christ. And we hopefully we share our gifts with each other, and we have a mutual word for each other. I hope.
So when you return back to the United States, it's my assumption that you're going to be reporting. Do you have to write a complete report on what you experienced? Do you go
I usually
before
do.
the sanctuary? Do you speak to the
Yeah.
congregation?
It depends what the senior pastor will let me do. But each time I come back, I always send to him a written report with a lot of photographs.
Okay.
And usually that's put up on our website so that everybody in the church can see what we've been doing. And the people seem to really love that. They, for weeks on end, they'll come up to me and go, "Man, what a great trip you guys had!" And uh, but it's really good for them to know the people they're supporting.
Mhm.
And I will tell you, the people that we do support when we arrive, they're really happy to see us, and it's just, I guess, an expression that we love them and that we care about them. We haven't forgotten about them,
Mhm.
and we get to hear what they want to do. And everybody that's out here serving Jesus on the mission field, they always have new ideas and new things they want to get done, new churches that they'd like to start, or they're looking at a different country or even a different neighborhood, and they're saying, how do we reach those people?
Yike. So there were two missionary or ministries that you connected to on this trip, correct? Two
A
main
lot more than
ones?
that, but here in South Africa, two primary church planters,
Okay.
African church
So,
planters. They're not Americans.
okay, right. So when do you bring these pastors to the United States to your church? Is that an annual something that you do where you try to choose the different missionaries and you bring them in for a missions conference? How do these Africans get exposure right before your church?
Well, we have a man named Victor who is from Zambia, and
Okay.
excuse me, actually Zimbabwe. And Victor Naka is his name. He is a Zimbabwean, and he lives in Bulawayo. He's what they call Ndebele, which is different from Shona. Shona is the large tribe in Zimbabwe. And he is a seminary trained man, and he is works for our national mission committee called Mission to the World. And our church, even before I became the missions pastor, had adopted him as a missionary. So he's a full missionary, full time missionary, an African who's now ahead of all the African ministries we have, for which I'm very, very grateful.
Okay.
It's very discouraging to me to be told, okay, we have another white man who's in charge of Africa.
Yeah.
you know, don't we have enough Africans that could do that?
Right.
And the answer is yes, we do. And so Victor introduced last year two young men who had finished Bible college who want to be church planters. And he somehow raised the money to get them to the United States. And he called us and said, "Hey, I want you to meet these two guys." And what was kind of funny, we said, "Oh, okay, we'll take one of them." And, we're going to treat him as a serious guest. And so then I get a message from the other guy. His name is Bongo. And,
Hmm.
Bongo says, "Hey, is it okay if I come too?" And we said, "All right, but we really don't have any room for you. We're not going to put you on a list of speakers. but if you get here, we'll try to take care of you. So I go to pick up the one guy we had planned on. He was coming up from Atlanta on a van, on a shuttle van. And I'm standing there in the shuttle parking lot. A van pulls up, but this van is not from Atlanta. It's from Nashville.
Mhm.
And an African gets off this van. And I go up to him. Hey, are you Toby Sitole? He goes, no, I'm Bongo. And I go, you weren't even really invited. But man, I'm glad you're here.
Mhm.
And he said, I'm so glad to meet you because I didn't know I found a place to stay, but I didn't know how to get there. I didn't know anybody, but you just happened by God's grace to be here when I get out of the van. So he gets there, and then Toby comes at the next van. And we just had a wonderful week last year in October, getting to know both of these men. They're married, they have children, they're serving the Lord. One is in Johannesburg, Bongo's down here in Cape Town. And we've had a great time with both of them in seeing what their vision is for these great cities, the great city of Johannesburg, great city of Cape Town. And I will tell you, we need literally, we need thousands more like them
Mhm.
because there's so many people here. And then there's a whole group of people, Bruce, that live in what we call the townships.
Okay.
And the townships are where the poor people live.
Mhm.
And you could even, if flew over it or drove around it, you would see how the economic levels go up. The people who are at the bottom, they're living in a tin shack.
Mhm.
They have no sanitation. They may or may not have electricity. It may or may not be legal electricity. Um, then they have other little buildings that the government built. They're all like cookie cutter boxes
Mhm.
that, these people are making a little bit more money, and then you finally get to so what we might call lower class housing. I mean, but to go all the way to the bottom, these people have it rough. I mean, if they lived in the village, it would be a mud hut.
Mhm.
But the mud hut would probably have more decency out in the village than these tin shacks do in the townships.
Mhm.
The famous township that everybody in the United States used to hear about is a township called Soweto um,
Yes. Yeah.
in Johannesburg.
Mhm.
But there are a lot of them, and they all have different names. And a lot of, there's all the things that come with poverty. There's drugs, there are gangs, there's violence against women, a lot of pregnancy out of wedlock, HIV, AIDS,
Yeah.
malnutrition, all the stuff. People living right up against each other by the thousands. They can't even keep count of how many people are in these townships. South Africa is no longer under apartheid, and it's an incredibly wealthy country. Oh my
Mm.
goodness.
Mm.
Uh, Vineyards and shopping malls and luxurious cars and beautiful homes, and at the same time contrasted with this really, really bad poverty.
Have you been able to see any of the prisons? Has that been on any of your touring, being in South Africa? Do you know the conditions of the prison system in South Africa?
Personally, I don't. I've tried to stay out of prison, Bruce.
Okay.
It's been my personal philosophy to avoid going to prison. You
Mm.
know, um, so no, I don't know what the prison system is like here in South Africa.
Mhm.
But I used to work for Prison Fellowship International for Africa.
Okay. Okay.
So I've been in prisons in a lot of countries, and African prisons are very different from American prisons. They're not nearly as violent as American prisons. American prisons are known for their violence,
Mm.
but there are some African countries where basically if your family doesn't bring you food or you don't have a garden in the prison, you're going to go hungry.
Yikes.
So there are certainly rough conditions, but on this trip, I did not get to go into prison and preach. I love preaching to inmates and love sharing the love of God with them. But I was trying to sort of joke with you that I'm trying to stay out of prison.
It amazes me in my own life. I'm 76, and there's a part of me that I almost say to myself when I'm driving, what would happen if you were stopped by the police and they had to handcuff you and bring you to the city jail to hold you? I think about that almost daily.
Mm,
When you said that I'm trying to stay out of prison, I didn't take that as a joke. I took that as a real statement because I'm trying to stay out of prison.
right.
And one would think that at 76 that I've reached the age where those mistakes are not going to be made. But and I don't say this, I don't speak this way often, but as a black man in my city, it's always a higher potential that could happen to me. And I have, and this may sound like I need counseling, but I have worked it in my head over and over and over again about how I would respond and respect the officer and do what I need to do to either get out of the situation or go to the city jail. You
Yeah.
would think that that's not something that a person who's never been in trouble with the law before has to think about, but I do every single day, especially
Yeah.
when I'm in the
Yeah.
automobile. Do you carry that at all in your heart about you being arrested or detained or arrested at all?
Well, yeah. Not nearly like you do.
Mhm.
My apprehension is not going based on being racial. Uh, but certainly, I grew up in a neighborhood that hated the police. I grew up in the
Yeah.
projects in Newark, New Jersey, and the police were not our friend in our neighborhood.
Mhm.
Um, you know, friends of mine were terribly mistreated at times by abusive policemen. So I was a little afraid of them. I have been arrested one time in seminary.
In
My wife turned,
seminary, you
yeah,
never
my
told
wife
me that
turned me
story.
in. You know, it's terrible.
You never told me that.
Yeah, I mean, I turned left. That was my crime. It
You
was a
turned
green light.
left.
I turned left, and there was a little sign on the post that said "No left turn" without
Uh-oh.
an arrow. I didn't see
Okay.
it, so
Okay.
all of a sudden, police cars behind me. I show them my license. They give me a ticket. I put it in my wallet, drove off, forgot all about it.
Oh.
I didn't pay the ticket. I didn't show up in court. A year later, I'm in the seminary classroom studying the Bible. My wife walks in. She had the car. She was coming to pick me up. She said, "Randy, there's a policeman outside and he wants to arrest you." And he said, "Come out and don't make any trouble." And I'm going, "What?" So I walk out and the policeman said, "You're Randy Nabors." I said, "Yeah." He said, "We have a warrant for your arrest because you didn't show up. You didn't pay your ticket."
Yeah.
I said, "Oh, what do I do?" He said, "Well, I'm going to arrest you." He said, "Now, uh, and the reason he stopped Joan because she was driving while black in a white neighborhood.
Uh,
She had done nothing wrong, but he pulls her over and he kept going back and forth to his radio. And he finally comes back and he says to her, "Is your husband white?" And
oh,
she,
he said that.
and that's when she said, "Yeah, he's white, and I'm going to pick him up now." And he said, "I'll follow you." My wife, she didn't have to say that,
Right.
but she just hung me out to dry.
She brought them to
Anyway,
you, is what you're saying.
yeah. Anyway, uh, uh, he said, get in your car with your wife, follow me to the police station. Next thing I know, they called the paddy wagon from downtown St. Louis. They put me in handcuffs, put me in the paddy wagon, take me to a precinct. The president of the seminary comes. He said, how do I get him out? He says, you have to post a bond. And he said, well, I could give you my house. And he said, okay, do you have the documents? He said, no, I got to go home. He said, well, we're going to take him to the downtown lockup. So they then take me from the precinct to the downtown big lockup.
Yeah. Yike.
And I'm in there with all these drunks. I'm there for hours. And the president of the seminary put up his house as a property bond to get me out.
Mm-hmm.
And so finally, I come out, I don't know, between 11 to midnight, and Joan is standing there, just the look on her face like, oh, thank God, you're still alive. I got you out of prison, And so later on, I had to appear before the judge and paid the fine. But I've been in prisons all over the world for prison fellowship, teaching the gospel, spending sometimes a whole week there at some of the worst prisons like Angola in Louisiana. The southern prisons really have a terrible reputation. But man, God is at work in the prison. I will tell you that.
I was going to say, how was their response to you and your message?
Oh my goodness, prisoners who love Jesus. Now, of course, there are prisoners there who hate God and hate people, and they need to be in prison because they're dangerous.
Yeah.
But there are other people in prison who love the Lord, and they would never have found Christ without being in prison. But Bruce, I'm glad you're not in prison, and I hope you never get there. And the same for me. Here's one of the prayers I prayed growing up in the city I grew up in. God, help me never to kill somebody. That's been one of my prayers in my life. I don't want to murder or kill anybody. I'd like to get to heaven without that.
Well, with this whole discussion with people around me now about weapons, and I think we've talked about that a couple times, but my wife and I have been talking about it. When I was in the South visiting family members, I met more family members who told me that they have a license to carry. I didn't know. I was very, very surprised. And here in Massachusetts, I have more of my associates and friends and people in the church who are now going to get their license to carry. They're 40 years old, 50 years old, never had a gun, didn't know how to shoot a gun. They're doing it. So I'm not going to get my license to carry because I don't think I couldn't pull the trigger. I couldn't do it. Why have a gun if you're not going to use it? They said if Karen and I were confronted on the street and we both had weapons, they said Karen would be the one that would take the villain down. She said Bruce would go up and hug him and try to put the gun down. Let me hug you. Let me hug you. But yeah, that when you make a statement like that, if you have weapons in your house, there's always the potential that something like that could happen. You could hurt somebody. So I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
Then let me switch you to something else that I wanted to get your opinion on today. The El Salvador president saying that he won't return the mistakenly deported man to the USA. Could you unravel that for me?
How could I unravel it? It's insane.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, every American ought to just shudder at this.
Correct.
We now have a dictator, and somebody needs to declare it. Somebody needs to say he has moved from being a democratically elected president to assuming dictatorial powers. And the reason I say that is because the courts have told him, you should return this man. And he is saying, I don't care what you say. There's another court that said, You should not have kicked out the Associated Press. You need to let them come back. And he says, I don't care what you say. And so this is what we call dictatorial power, where nobody can hold him accountable. And this is why we fought the revolution, because we did not want a king. We did not want somebody with that kind of power. We didn't want, there are several things that we said about the king. We don't want you to arrest our people and send them to prison in a foreign country. That was one of the reasons for the revolution. And here we're back to square one. And unless the Congress will come to their senses, or unless we throw out this Congress and elect a new one to hold this man accountable, it doesn't even matter what the courts say. We say we have, three legs of government and they're a balance and a counterbalance. But when the Congress is totally obsequious and subservient to the executive, the courts have little power. And we all need to be frightened of what that means for us. At this point, the Conservative Party in this nation, they love what he's doing. And until the economy crumbles, or until their freedoms are taken away, they're complicit. They are in this with him. And it's a scary time for America, in my opinion. May God change his heart. May God help him to repent. May God help him to see the danger that our country is facing. But to me, it's dangerous.
And even when the El Salvador president is saying, I can't return them, even if you supply an airplane to do it, because I'd be returning a terrorist to your country. That all these,
of which there's no evidence. There's no evidence.
There's no evidence. No. But all of these world leaders, though, now today for the first time, over at Harvard, the president of Harvard is refusing to go along with what Donald Trump wants him to do, and is, don't give me the government money that I usually receive. We're not going to change our curriculum. We're not going to say no to DEI. It's the first time that either a law firm or a college president, this is all going to affect us as Christians, because it's the Christian community. I've watched some videos, and I've heard, I don't know if you've ever heard the president's testimony. And the last thing I heard is what happened when he was shot in the air, and heard him a little bit. But the people he has, the religious leaders that he has advising him, I really question some of them, their lifestyles and their ministries. But they are there in positions of power and leadership. And I don't know why I walk down the street. I'm just troubled with seeing a man who has been taken out of this country, placed in a notorious prison. The government says we made a mistake and they won't return him. I don't know if the government is saying, the president is saying, his leaders are saying, we have the power and we're going to show you that even with an innocent man, we could do what we want and there's nothing you can do about it. Is that the message that's being conveyed to all of us?
Well, the message is we don't want non-white people in this country.
The overall message.
The overall message is essentially we do not want immigrants here unless they're from Scandinavia or white people from South Africa.
South Africa, yeah.
We don't want people of color coming here, especially if they don't come legally through the process. Now, the problem right now is we got a bunch of people who have applied for asylum legally.
Mhm.
They have put their petitions in. We have graduate students who are here on a student visa legally. And the government is coming and saying, we're taking your visa away. And the reason is because you made a criticism of President Trump.
Mhm.
Now, as an American, I find that absurd. One of the glories of America is we're supposed to be able to criticize our president,
Mhm.
you know. And if you and I, now we're talking about this, we are on recording that we have spoken critically of this president.
Mhm.
Now, could it ever happen that you and I wind up in jail for that?
Mhm.
I will tell you, and most people would say, oh, that's absurd. That'll never happen. Watch it happen.
Mhm.
Watch our freedoms be taken away from us step by step. Now, am I a conservative who is opposed to a liberal progressive agenda of abortion and same sex marriage, transgenderism? I don't like those things. I think they're immoral. But I am an American who wants everybody to enjoy the freedom of religion that I enjoy. And I don't like an oppressive dictatorial government. And there are going to be consequences of this. Um, and unfortunately, America's politics is like a pendulum. It swings back and forth.
Mhm.
And we all yearn for peace, and we yearn for people to tell the truth who are our leaders and not lie to us and manipulate. And that's kind of what I think is going on. We obviously have to solve how we allow people into this country
Yeah.
in an orderly way.
Yeah.
And none of us want gang members or criminals here. But the reality is, immigrants commit less crime than our own citizens commit.
Mhm.
And what Trump has done is he's created this false
Narrative.
image
Yeah.
that these people are here to rape us, to kill us, murder us. Now, yeah, it happens from time to time, and it makes all the headlines.
Yeah.
But our own people do these things, you know.
So,
So,
you're coming back from a really blessed time where you imparted into the lives of leaders and their followers, and they've also did something to bless you and your wife Joan. You're coming back to the United States to walk back into all of this. Do you have to prepare yourself for the return to your country?
well, I wasn't thinking about it till you brought it up, but now emotionally, I'm going to be a wreck all the way home.
You're gonna say, I'm not Randy Nabors. I'm not Randy
Yeah,
Nabors.
that's right. I'm going to, you know, hey, I love my country. I love the United States of America. I'm eager to get back home, see my family and my friends, being part of my church. And if I have to suffer with my fellow Americans, I'll do it. Uh, but I will pray. I'll be praying. And,
Mhm.
I just, hey, the Lord gave us a great deliverance yesterday. We were on the highway here, and they have some super highways. I mean, these cars are going fast.
Mhm.
And so Pastor Bongo's driving. Joan and I are in this car, a little car. Sure enough, we have a flat tire
Eek,
in the fast lane,
eek.
and we got to get across 4 lanes of traffic over. And God in His mercy got us there. We pull off, but boy, those cars are whipping by us.
Wow.
And talk about, I'm praying, Lord, to help us, and we're working on the tire. And thankfully, a South African policeman, uh, a black African policeman,
Mhm.
pulls up behind us. And, Pastor Bongo had told me, he says, we don't feel about the police like you do in America. We get along with our police.
Yeah.
And this policeman, he gets out, he starts helping us change the tire. You know, it turns out his clan is the same as Bongo's mother's clan among the Kosa people, you know, and they're having a great conversation. I handed him a Bible, It was just wonderful to have,
Mm.
and a lot of American policemen would do the same thing, you know, and I have friends who are policemen who would do the same thing. But as just an answer to prayer, that man got there and protected us and got us back on the road. I'm just very thankful
That's good. That's good.
for its kindness to us.
What was your Palm Sunday like?
It was really a nice day. I got to preach there. The church that Pastor Bongo is starting meets on the campus of the University of Cape Town.
Okay.
It has about 35,000 students, and it's a beautiful campus. And so they meet in the music facility, uh, and it was just a really sweet time of preaching the gospel and taking communion together.
Mm.
And then there is a man in the church who is a missionary, and he is doing a student ministry to the University of Cape Town. So we just walked 2 blocks away to his house, where he has lots of students come over, and we had a lunch together. It was a sweet day of fellowship and love. So I'm excited about the work they're doing here. Student ministry is wide open. The universities are very much the same as in the U.S. They are secular universities. Their faculties are not very much in favor of Christianity, very critical of it.
Mm.
But yet, students come here who really desperately need Christ. They need community. They need love. Um, this week, we also went up to visit the campus of the University of Stellenbosch. I can hardly say it.
Yeah.
Stellenbosch.
Mm.
And they have some great wineries up there, beautiful country, um, but also a huge student body, and they're planting a church there. And I'm just excited to see the work of the gospel going forward, people being called to faith and struggling, people, just like everywhere else, young
Yeah.
adults trying to figure out, is there a God? Is he good? You know, uh, I know him personally? How can he how can he help me in my life? And the Lord is at work. So please, everybody's listening to us, pray for people to be saved in this country of South Africa who might live for Jesus Christ. One of the
Uh,
things that I had to tell some of the white people here is I said, there's a prejudice in me. If I meet a white South African, I like I have to be convinced you're not a racist, you
uh,
know. But so many of them are great people. They
yeah.
love in their people in their country, and they want there to be multicultural, multi-ethnic congregations of people who are living out the gospel,
Mhm.
and it's happening.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord.
Well, one last thing that I'll share before we go. I received a letter, and I don't have the name of the organization. When I find it, I'll send it to you. Um, it's a black young man and his wife have a ministry to young people, and it's in the South, and they want to come to Boston and establish their ministry to young people in Boston, and they want to partner with our church. They want to lease space in our church. So
Ah,
let me tell you the reason why we may not be able to do it. Uh, if you lease space in a church, the churches are not taxable. But if you lease space and you're bringing an income in from the people that you lease the space to, guess what? Your church becomes taxable. Yeah. And and let me just say this quickly. In 2003, we leased our steeple to T-Mobile, and the city did not send us a bill until 2015. We never received the bill until 2023. Never received a bill. The city is saying today we owe the city $177,000 because once you leased your steeple to T-Mobile, your church became taxable. We're finding out that there are a number of churches in Boston who didn't know that and are in the process of losing their churches or having to pay all this money back. So that's going to have impact on churches like ours, where we used to lease space out to people who wanted to come in because they're using the gas, they're using the oil. You got to keep the place heated, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's becoming a problem in our city, and we are at the leadership level in explaining to other churches about what could happen, and we're trying to get ourselves out of a mess. So I'll talk to you more about that when you get here, but the churches need to know that they will be subject to taxes on their churches, heavy taxation, if they lease property to other ministries that only want to minister and partner with you. So we'll talk
yeah,
about that
yeah,
later.
yeah. Well, Lord, may the Lord deliver you, brother.
Thank you,
We
sir.
got to go catch an airplane. So would you close us out in prayer?
Father, in Jesus' name, bless the neighbors as they board their plane, as they